When I stood at that altar watching Sarah's face crumble as I introduced her other family to our wedding guests, I realized that the woman I thought I knew for 3 years had been the greatest actress I'd ever met. But let me take you back to how this all began, because before I tell you about the most satisfying moment of revenge in my life, you need to understand just how perfectly she had fooled me. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and if you're new here, subscribe to hear more stories about discovering the truth when it matters most. Now, let me take you back to how I discovered that love can be the most dangerous lie of all. My name is James, I'm 32 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was living the American dream. Sarah and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months, and our wedding was supposed to be the perfect culmination of what I believed was a perfect relationship. She was a nurse at Seattle General Hospital, working those brutal 12-hour shifts that often stretched into 14 or 15 hours. At least that's what she told me. I'm a certified public accountant, and I work pretty standard hours, 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, with the occasional weekend project during tax season. Sarah's schedule was chaotic, unpredictable, but I admired her dedication. "The patients need me, James," she'd say, kissing me goodbye at 6 a.m. only to stumble back through our apartment door at midnight, exhausted and barely able to speak. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way she'd turn her phone face down during dinner, how she never wanted me to surprise her at work with lunch, the fact that in 3 years together, I'd only met 2 of her co-workers, and only briefly. But when you love someone, you don't question their dedication to saving lives. You don't interrogate the woman who falls asleep in your arms every night about why she sometimes smells like different soap, or why there are occasionally goldfish crackers in her purse when she claims she hasn't eaten all day. Our engagement party was beautiful. 50 of our closest friends and family members gathered in my parents' backyard, celebrating what everyone called the perfect couple. Sarah wore a blue dress that made her eyes sparkle, and when she laughed at my father's terrible jokes, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. Even now, remembering that night makes my chest tight, with a mixture of rage and something I can't quite name, maybe grief for the man I used to be, the one who believed in fairy tales. The wedding planning had been surprisingly smooth. Sarah left most of the decisions to me, saying she was too busy with work to worry about flowers and seating charts. "Whatever makes you happy makes me happy," she'd say, and I interpreted this as the selfless love of a woman who trusted me completely. I should have realized that someone planning to spend their life with you would want more input into the biggest day of that life. 3 weeks before our wedding, I was finalizing the guest list when I noticed something odd. Sarah had given me a list of her must-invite people, family members, childhood friends, a few colleagues. But when I cross-referenced it with her phone contacts one day while she was in the shower, I realized she'd only included about half of the people she regularly texted. When I asked her about it, she shrugged. "Some people are just work friends, James. You don't need to invite everyone you know to your wedding." That made sense, it really did. But it was the first crack in the foundation of my trust, and once doubt creeps in, it's like water finding its way through concrete. It starts small, but it never stops growing. The night that changed everything was a Tuesday in April. Sarah had left for another late shift, and I'd settled in with a beer and a baseball game when my neighbor knocked on our door. Mrs. Chen from 4B was holding a package that had been delivered to her apartment by mistake, one of those subscription boxes for children's snacks. The label clearly showed our apartment number, but it was addressed to Sarah Martinez. Not Sarah Coleman, her actual last name, Martinez. When Sarah came home at 1 a.m., I was waiting with the package on our kitchen table. "Honey, this came for you," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "though the name's wrong." She barely glanced at it. "Oh, that's weird. Probably a mistake. I'll call them tomorrow." She kissed my forehead and headed for the shower. I watched her go, and for the first time in 3 years, I wondered who I was really sleeping next to every night. But the real shock was still coming, and it would arrive on an ordinary Saturday morning at the most ordinary place in the world, the grocery store 2 streets over from our apartment. The Saturday morning that shattered my entire world started like any other. Sarah was working another weekend shift, and or so she said, and I needed to pick up groceries for the week. I usually shopped at the Safeway near our apartment, but they were out of the specific coffee Sarah liked, so I decided to try the smaller market on Pine Street, just 2 streets over from where we lived. I was standing in the cereal aisle, debating between brands, when I heard a voice that made my blood freeze in my veins, not because it was scary, but because it was impossible. It was Sarah's voice, crystal clear, coming from the next aisle over. But Sarah was at the hospital. Sarah was supposed to be inserting IVs and checking on patients, not grocery shopping at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. Emma, put that back. We talked about this. We ask first before we grab things off the shelf. My heart started pounding so hard, I thought other shoppers might hear it. I crept toward the end of the aisle, staying low behind the display of breakfast bars, and peered around the corner. What I saw didn't just shock me. It rewrote my understanding of reality itself. There was Sarah, my Sarah, wearing clothes I'd never seen before, pushing a cart with 2 small children sitting in it. Twins, by the look of them, probably around 3 years old. A boy and a girl with dark hair, and Sarah's exact nose, Sarah's stubborn chin, Sarah's way of tilting their heads when they were thinking. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The most shocking part was the man walking beside her, his hand casually resting on her lower back, in a gesture so intimate, so naturally possessive, that I felt physically sick. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with sandy brown hair and work-worn hands. He wore a mechanic's uniform with Marcus embroidered on the chest pocket. "Daddy, can we get the cookies with the frosting?" The little girl, Emma, asked him, not Sarah. Him. "We'll see, Princess. Let's ask Mommy what she thinks." Mommy. They called Sarah Mommy. I stood there in frozen disbelief as I watched my fiancée, the woman I was supposed to marry in 18 days, living what appeared to be a completely different life with a completely different family. She moved through that store like she belonged there, like she'd done this routine 1,000 times before. Marcus grabbed items off high shelves for her. The children chattered to her about their week at daycare. She kissed his cheek when he made them laugh. This wasn't an affair. This was a whole other existence. I followed them at a distance as they finished shopping, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone steady as I took pictures. They moved like a family unit, comfortable and established. Marcus paid for the groceries with a credit card, and I saw Sarah squeeze his arm affectionately while they waited. In the parking lot, I watched from behind a van as they loaded groceries into a blue Honda Civic I'd never seen before. Sarah strapped the children into car seats with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it thousands of times. As Marcus started the engine, I heard him say, "Should we stop by your mother's on the way home? She wanted to see the kids." "Let's call first," Sarah replied. "You know how she gets when we just show up. Your mother's." These people knew Sarah's mother. In 3 years together, I'd met Sarah's mother exactly twice, and both times she'd seemed oddly distant, almost confused about who I was and how long Sarah and I had been together. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after they drove away, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I drove slowly through the neighborhood until I found the blue Honda parked in the driveway of a small yellow house on Maple Street, 2 streets away from our apartment. 2 streets. The house had children's toys in the yard, a wooden swing set, a sandbox, a garden that was clearly tended by someone who cared about it. Through the front window, I could see family photos on the mantel, but I was too far away to make out the details. I drove home in a daze, my entire understanding of my life crumbling around me. When I walked into our apartment, the apartment I thought Sarah and I shared as our only home, I saw it differently. I noticed that Sarah's clothes only filled half the closet, that she never got mail here except for a few bills, and her medical insurance, that the emergency contacts list on our refrigerator had numbers I didn't recognize. For 3 years, I'd been living with a ghost, a woman who disappeared every day into another life, another family, another version of herself that I never could have imagined existed. But I was wrong about one thing. It was about to get so much worse. Because when I finally worked up the courage to look up that address online, I discovered something that made my stomach drop through the floor. The house on Maple Street wasn't just where Sarah was playing house with another man. According to the property records, it was where Sarah Martinez had been living for the past 4 years, which meant she'd been living with Marcus since before she met me. The next few days passed in a surreal haze. I went to work, came home, made dinner, watched TV with Sarah and pretended my world hadn't completely imploded. Every time she kissed me goodbye for another late shift, I wanted to scream. Every time she curled up against me in bed, I felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger. But I needed information before I confronted her, because I was beginning to realize that Sarah was far more calculating than I'd ever imagined. I took a sick day on Wednesday and parked outside the yellow house on Maple Street. At 7:30 a.m., Marcus came out in his work uniform, kissed Sarah goodbye on the front porch, and drove off in a pickup truck with Peterson's Auto Repair painted on the side. The twins ran around the yard while Sarah watched from the porch, coffee mug in hand, looking like the picture of domestic contentment. This was her real life. I was the side piece, and I hadn't even known it. After Marcus left and Sarah took the children inside, I drove to Peterson's Auto Repair. It was a small shop in an industrial area about 15 minutes from downtown. I parked across the street and called the number on their sign. "Peterson's Auto, this is Marcus speaking." His voice was warm, friendly, completely unsuspecting. I hung up without saying anything, but I'd confirmed what I needed to know. This was where he worked, and that meant I could find him. I spent the rest of the day researching. Social media gave me more pieces of the puzzle than I wanted. Marcus Peterson, 34 years old, co-owner of Peterson's Auto Repair with his brother. His Facebook page was full of pictures of him with Sarah and the twins, camping trips, birthday parties, family barbecues. The photos went back 4 years, documenting a relationship that had existed for longer than mine with Sarah. But here's what made my blood run cold. In his relationship status it said, "Married to Sarah Martinez." Not engaged, married. And according to the timestamps on their photos, they'd gotten married, at least on social media, 6 months before Sarah and I got engaged. I found their wedding photos. A small ceremony in someone's backyard, Sarah in a simple white dress, Marcus in a borrowed suit, the twins as flower girl and ring bearer. Sarah looked radiant, genuinely happy in a way I'd never seen before. The comments from friends and family were full of congratulations and about time messages that suggested everyone in their circle had been expecting this for years. That night, Sarah came home from her shift and found me sitting at our kitchen table with my laptop open. "You're up late," she said, kissing the top of my head. "Couldn't sleep." "Just work stuff," I lied, closing the laptop before she could see the screen. "How was your day?" "Exhausting. We had 3 trauma cases come in during my shift and I barely had time to eat." She moved around our kitchen with practiced ease, making herself a snack, telling me about her fictional day while I watched her and wondered how someone could lie so effortlessly. "That sounds awful," I said. "Did you work with Jenny today?" Jenny was one of the 2 co-workers I'd actually met. Sarah paused for just a fraction of a second. "No, Jenny's on nights this week. I was mostly with the day shift supervisor." Another lie smoothly delivered. I excused myself and went to bed early, claiming I had a headache. As Sarah showered, I heard her phone buzzing with text messages. When she came to bed, she put it on silent and placed it face down on her nightstand, just like she did every night. The next morning, I called in sick again and drove back to Peterson's Auto Repair. This time I went inside. Marcus was under the hood of a Honda Accord, his sleeves rolled up, completely focused on his work. Up close, he looked like a decent guy, clean-cut, professional, the kind of person you'd trust with your car and probably your problems too. "Can I help you?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "I hope so," I said, my heart pounding. "I think we need to talk about Sarah." The color drained from his face. He looked around the garage, then motioned for me to follow him to a small office in the back. He closed the door behind us and leaned against it, like he was blocking an escape route. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "My name is James Coleman. Sarah and I have been together for 3 years. We're supposed to get married in 2 weeks. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, then sank into the chair behind his desk. "This can't be happening," he whispered. "This can't be fucking happening." "How long?" I asked. 4 years, he said, not looking at me. "We've been together 4 years. We got married 8 months ago. We have twins together, Emma and Ethan. They're 3 years old." The math hit me like a physical blow. Sarah had gotten pregnant with Marcus's children while she was dating me. She'd been planning a wedding with him while accepting my proposal. "She told me she works late shifts at the hospital," I said. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "She told me she works early shifts. Leaves at 6 a.m., comes home around 4 p.m., says she spends her evenings taking care of her sick mother across town." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 men who just discovered we were both victims of the same elaborate deception. "What kind of person does this?" Marcus asked, and I could hear the pain in his voice. "What kind of person maintains 2 complete lives, 2 families for years?" I didn't have an answer, but I was starting to form a plan, one that would ensure Sarah never got the chance to destroy another person's life the way she'd destroyed ours. "Marcus," I said, "I have an idea. But first, I need to ask you something. Do you love those kids?" "More than my own life," he said without hesitation. Then we're going to make sure Sarah never gets the chance to hurt them the way she's hurt us. But we're going to do it right, and we're going to do it in a way that she'll never forget. Over the next week, Marcus and I met 3 more times to piece together exactly how Sarah had managed to deceive both of us for so long. What we discovered was a masterpiece of manipulation that was both impressive and terrifying in its complexity. Sarah had structured her lies around our work schedules with surgical precision. I worked 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Marcus worked Tuesday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. This gave her Sunday and Monday with me, Tuesday through Friday with Marcus and the kids, and Saturday as her flex day, where she could be with either family depending on what story she told. The hospital shifts were completely fabricated. Sarah did work as a nurse, but only part-time, and only on weekends at a small clinic across town, 3 12-hour shifts per month, which barely paid for her car insurance and phone bill. Everything else, the apartment rent she split with me, the mortgage she helped Marcus pay, groceries for both households, came from an elaborate shell game of credit cards and lies. She told me she was paying off student loans, Marcus said during one of our meetings. That's why she couldn't contribute more to the house expenses. I felt bad for her, so I covered most everything. She told me her mother was sick and needed expensive treatments, I replied. I've been giving her $300 a month for the past 2 years. We'd both been subsidizing Sarah's double life without knowing it. The sick mother was another fiction. Sarah's mother was perfectly healthy and lived in Portland, completely unaware that her daughter was engaged to 2 different men. The children's schedule was the most heartbreaking part. Marcus worked during the day, so Sarah would take Emma and Ethan to daycare in the morning, then spend her work hours with me. When I thought she was pulling double shifts on weekends, she was actually home with Marcus and the kids, playing the devoted wife and mother. The kids call her Mommy, Marcus told me, his voice breaking. They don't understand why Mommy has to go away so much. They think it's because of work because that's what she tells them. Emma started crying last week because she said she missed Mommy too much. That's when I realized the true scope of Sarah's cruelty. It wasn't just Marcus and me she was deceiving. It was 2 innocent children who loved her unconditionally and couldn't understand why their mother kept disappearing. The logistics of her deception was staggering. She had 2 different phones, the one I knew about, and another one registered under her maiden name that Marcus called. She had clothes at both places, toiletries at both places, even different hairstyles depending on which family she was with. With me, she wore her hair long and straight. With Marcus, she kept it shorter and curly. She'd even created different versions of her personality for each relationship. With me, she was the dedicated career woman who was too tired for much physical affection, but loved quiet nights at home. With Marcus, she was the playful young mother who organized family game nights and weekend adventures. She never seemed tired with us, Marcus admitted. She was always full of energy, always planning activities for the kids. I thought it was just because she loved being a mum. The wedding planning had been particularly masterful. She'd convinced me to handle most of the arrangements because she was too busy with work. Meanwhile, she'd told Marcus that they needed to keep their marriage quiet for now because she was having problems with her family and didn't want drama. He'd agreed to a small ceremony with just close friends, thinking he was protecting her from stress. Our wedding venue was booked for Saturday, June 15th. I later learned that she'd planned a vow renewal ceremony with Marcus for the following weekend, telling him it would be their chance to celebrate properly once her family situation calmed down. She was going to marry both of us within 7 days of each other. The financial investigation Marcus and I did together revealed even more disturbing details. Sarah had credit cards neither of us knew about, all maxed out. She had a storage unit where she kept gifts from both of us, engagement rings, jewelry, clothing, like trophies from her dual conquests. She'd even applied for a joint bank account with Marcus using my credit report, somehow managing to forge enough documentation to make it look legitimate. She's been planning this for years, Marcus said during our final meeting before the wedding. This isn't someone who made a mistake or got in over her head. This is someone who designed a system to exploit both of us. We'd agreed on our plan by then. Calling off the wedding would be the easy way out, but it wouldn't accomplish what we both wanted, ensuring that Sarah faced consequences for what she'd done and making sure she could never do it to anyone else. The kids are going to be traumatized by this, Marcus worried. They're going to be traumatized anyway when they eventually find out who their mother really is, I replied. At least this way, they'll learn the truth from people who love them rather than discovering it by accident years from now. Marcus had already filed for emergency custody, based on Sarah's abandonment and deception. His lawyer was confident that any judge would grant it once they saw the evidence we'd compiled. Sarah's weekend nursing job didn't provide nearly enough income to support the children, and her web of lies made her an unfit guardian in the eyes of the law. The night before our wedding, Sarah seemed more nervous than excited. She kept checking her phone, pacing around our apartment, double-checking details that had already been confirmed. "Are you having second thoughts?" I asked her, curious to see what she'd say. "No," she said quickly. "I just want everything to be perfect. This is the most important day of our lives." She had no idea how right she was. It was going to be the most important day of her life, just not in the way she imagined. As she fell asleep next to me for what I knew would be the last time, I looked at her face in the moonlight and tried to understand how someone could live such an elaborate lie for so long. She looked peaceful, innocent even, like the woman I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. But that woman had never existed. She'd been a character Sarah played, just like the devoted wife and mother she played for Marcus and the kids. Tomorrow, both performances would end forever. The morning of our wedding, I woke up before Sarah and lay in bed watching her sleep. Knowing this would be the last time I'd see her face without the weight of what was coming, she looked so peaceful, so innocent, that for a moment I almost felt guilty about what Marcus and I had planned. Then I remembered Emma and Ethan asking their daddy why Mommy had to go away so much, and my resolve hardened. Sarah stirred around 7, stretching and smiling at me with what seemed like genuine happiness. "Our wedding day," she whispered, kissing my cheek. "I can't believe it's finally here." "Neither can I said, and I meant it. She spent the morning getting ready at her sister's house, or at least that's where she told me she was going. I later learned she'd actually gone to Marcus's house to help get the kids ready, and explained to them why Mommy would be away for the weekend. She told them she had to work a special assignment, but that she'd bring them back presents. I used the morning to make final preparations. The wedding was set for 2 p.m. at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, with cocktails at 4 p.m. and dinner at 6 p.m. We'd invited 120 guests, 80 from my side, 40 from Sarah's. At least, that's what I thought until this week. Marcus and I had spent days crafting the perfect invitation. It needed to be worded carefully so that Sarah wouldn't suspect anything if she saw it, but clear enough that Marcus and the kids would understand they were welcome guests. The invitation I sent to Marcus read, "James and Sarah request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. Sarah has spoken so fondly of her dear friends Emma, Ethan, and Marcus, and we would be delighted if you could join us for this special day. Please join us at the head table as Sarah's honored guests." I'd included a note explaining that Sarah wanted to surprise me by having some of her closest friends at the wedding, and that she'd asked me to handle the invitations personally. Marcus played his part perfectly, confirming their attendance and asking what the children should wear to such a fancy event. The head table arrangement was crucial to the plan. Traditionally, the head table seats the bride and groom in the center, with the wedding party flanking them on either side. I'd modified our seating chart to include 2 additional seats directly to Sarah's left, prime real estate, that would ensure Marcus and the twins were visible to every single wedding guest. I'd also arranged for our photographer to take extra photos of the head table to capture all of Sarah's special relationships. The photographer thought it was sweet that Sarah wanted to honor her friends' children by including them in the formal portraits. My best man, David, knew something was off, but didn't ask questions when I told him there might be some drama during the reception. "Just be ready to help me handle whatever happens," I said. David had been my roommate in college and knew me well enough to trust that I wouldn't do anything crazy without good reason. The morning flew by in a blur of final details. The florist delivered the bouquets on time. The caterer confirmed the menu. The string quartet arrived early to set up. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned for what would appear to be a perfect wedding celebration. At noon, I got a text from Marcus. "We're on our way. The kids are excited about the fancy party. Thank you for doing this the right way." At 12:30, I got a text from Sarah. "Getting dressed now. See you at the altar, my love. Today we start our forever." The irony was almost too much to bear. I spent the hour before the ceremony in the groom's ready room with David and my other groomsmen, adjusting my tie and trying to calm my nerves. This wasn't pre-wedding jitters. This was the anxiety of knowing I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of what everyone expected to be a celebration of love. "You okay, man?" David asked. "You look like you might throw up." "I'm fine," I said. "Just want everything to go perfectly." And I did. I wanted Sarah to walk down that aisle feeling beautiful and loved and triumphant. I wanted her to see all our friends and family gathered to celebrate our union. I wanted her to feel, for just a few more minutes, like she'd successfully pulled off the greatest deception of all time, because the higher she felt in that moment, the further she'd have to fall. At 1:45, the wedding coordinator knocked on our door. "It's time, gentlemen. The bride is ready, the guests are seated, and we have a beautiful ceremony ahead of us." As we walked toward the main ballroom, I caught a glimpse of Marcus and the twins through the crowd. Emma was wearing a pale pink dress with a flower crown, looking like a tiny princess. Ethan wore a little navy suit with a bow tie that kept coming undone. Marcus had cleaned up nicely in a dark suit I'd never seen him wear before. They were seated exactly where I'd planned. Front row, Sarah's side, with a perfect view of the altar. Emma was swinging her legs and looking around in wonder at all the fancy decorations. Ethan was whispering questions to Marcus, who answered patiently while keeping his eyes fixed on the back of the room, waiting for Sarah to appear. I took my position at the front of the room and looked out at our assembled guests. Sarah's parents, who'd driven up from Portland. My college friends, some of whom had traveled from across the country. Sarah's co-workers from the clinic, the few who actually knew her. Marcus's family, who thought they were there as friends of the bride. The string quartet began the processional music. First came Sarah's maid of honor, her sister Jennifer, who'd never liked me but had been cordial for Sarah's sake. Then my sister, as matron of honor, followed by our bridesmaids and groomsmen. And then the music swelled into the wedding march, and every head in the room turned toward the back doors. Sarah appeared in her wedding dress, a stunning ivory gown with delicate lace sleeves and a cathedral train. She looked absolutely radiant, glowing with happiness and anticipation. As she began her walk down the aisle, I saw her scanning the crowd with that bright smile, nodding at familiar faces, soaking in the moment. Her eyes passed over Marcus and the children without the slightest flicker of recognition or concern. She'd compartmentalized so completely that she could look directly at her other family and feel nothing but joy about the elaborate lie she was about to make official. But then, just as she reached the halfway point of her walk, Emma's voice rang out across the silent ballroom. "Mummy, Mummy, you look like a princess." Sarah stopped walking. The smile froze on her face. Every head in the room turned to look at the little girl in the front row who'd just called the bride Mommy. And that's when I knew there was no going back. The moment Emma's voice echoed through the ballroom calling Sarah Mommy, time seemed to stop. I watched Sarah's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and then pure terror in the span of about 3 seconds. Her bouquet trembled in her hands as she stared at Marcus and the twins, her mind clearly racing to understand how they could possibly be there. But Sarah was nothing if not quick on her feet. After that initial moment of shock, she managed to force her smile back into place and continued walking down the aisle. I could see her brain working, probably convincing herself that she could still somehow talk her way out of this situation. When she reached the altar, she took my hands as planned, but I felt them shaking. "James," she whispered, leaning close, "why are Marcus and the kids here? How do they know about the wedding?" "We'll talk about it later," I whispered back. "Let's just get through the ceremony." The officiant, Pastor Williams from my childhood church, began the traditional opening words. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of James and Sarah in holy matrimony." His voice carried across the silent ballroom, but I could feel the tension radiating from the crowd. Everyone had heard Emma's outburst, and people were confused about why a child in the audience would call the bride Mommy. I caught my mother's eye in the front row. She looked puzzled but was trying to maintain her composure. Sarah's parents looked equally confused, but were probably assuming Emma had mistaken Sarah for someone else. During the opening remarks, I glanced over at Marcus. He was holding Emma on his lap now, one hand gently covering her mouth to prevent any more outbursts. Ethan was standing on his chair, trying to get a better look at Sarah. Marcus's face was pale but determined. We'd agreed that he wouldn't make a scene during the ceremony itself. That would come later during the reception, when everyone was relaxed and unprepared. Pastor Williams moved through the standard wedding liturgy. Marriage is a sacred covenant between two people who promise to love, honor, and cherish each other through all of life's joys and sorrows. Sarah squeezed my hands tighter with each word, probably hoping that if she just got through the vows, she could figure out how to handle the Marcus situation afterward. When we reached the part where Pastor Williams asked if anyone had reason why we should not be wed, I felt Sarah's entire body tense. She was waiting for Marcus to stand up, to object, to expose her right there in front of everyone. But Marcus stayed seated, just as we'd planned. The real revelation would be much more devastating than a simple objection during the ceremony. "The couple has chosen to write their own vows," Pastor Williams announced. "James, would you like to go first?" This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I'd written 2 sets of vows, the ones Sarah expected to hear and the ones I was actually going to say. I pulled out the folded paper from my jacket pocket and looked into Sarah's eyes. "Sarah," I began, "3 years ago, you came into my life and changed everything. You taught me about love, about trust, about building a future with someone." Her eyes were shining with tears, probably from relief that I wasn't exposing her right then and there. "You showed me what it means to share your life completely with another person, to be vulnerable and honest and open about who you really are." A few people in the audience smiled at what they thought was romantic sentiment. Sarah's smile was becoming more genuine, probably thinking she was going to get through this after all. "You've taught me that love isn't just about the time we spend together. It's about all the moments in between, all the parts of your life that make you who you are. And today I want to celebrate not just our love, but all the love in your life, all the people who have shaped you into the incredible woman you are." I turned slightly toward the audience, gesturing toward Marcus and the twins. "I want to honor the relationships that have made you the loving, nurturing person I fell in love with, the way you care for others, the way you put family first, the way you've built such meaningful connections with people like Marcus, Emma, and Ethan." Sarah's face had gone completely white. She realized I was acknowledging them deliberately, not just trying to ignore an awkward situation. "So today, as we promise to share our lives together, I want to make sure we're sharing everything. No secrets, no hidden parts of ourselves, no corners of our hearts that we keep locked away. Complete honesty, complete transparency, complete trust." I looked back into Sarah's eyes. "Do you promise to share your whole life with me, Sarah? Every part of it?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Pastor Williams waited patiently, probably assuming she was overcome with emotion. The silence stretched on until Sarah finally managed to whisper, Yes, I promise." "Sarah," Pastor Williams prompted, "would you like to share your vows now?" Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her paper. She looked down at what she'd written, then back up at me, then over at Marcus and the children. I could see her trying to decide whether to go through with the ceremony or run. "James," she began, her voice barely audible, You mean everything to me. You've given me a home, a future, a chance at happiness that I never thought I deserved." Tears were streaming down her face now, but they weren't tears of joy. "I promise to love you and honor you and be faithful to you for as long as we both shall live." The words came out in a rush, like she was trying to get through them, before she lost her nerve completely. Pastor Williams smiled and moved toward the ring exchange. "The rings you exchange today are symbols of the unbroken circle of love. James, please place the ring on Sarah's finger and repeat after me." I slipped the ring onto her trembling finger and said the words I'd memorized. "With this ring I thee wed and pledge my faithful love." When it was Sarah's turn, her hands shook so violently that she almost dropped my ring. "With this ring I thee wed," she whispered, "and pledge my faithful love." The irony of those words would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. "By the power vested in me by the state of Washington," Pastor Williams announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. James, you may kiss your bride." I leaned in and kissed Sarah gently, and for just a moment she melted into me like she used to, like the woman I thought I'd fallen in love with. Then the reality of our situation crashed back over her, and she pulled away with terror in her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pastor Williams announced to the applauding crowd, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. James Coleman." As we walked back down the aisle together, Sarah's grip on my arm was so tight it hurt. "James, please," she whispered urgently. "Let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. We'll talk during cocktails," I said quietly, smiling and waving at our guests. "Right now, let's just enjoy our reception." But as we reached the back of the ballroom, I saw Marcus standing with Emma and Ethan, and I knew the hardest part was just beginning, because soon Sarah would have to face not just her 2 fiancés, but the children who called her mommy and couldn't understand why she looked so scared to see them. The cocktail hour was supposed to be the relaxed, celebratory buffer between our ceremony and dinner. Instead, it became the most tense 60 minutes of my life as Sarah desperately tried to manage the impossible situation she'd created. We'd barely made it through the receiving line when Sarah grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a quiet corner near the bar. "James, you have to tell me what's going on. How did Marcus know about the wedding? Why are the kids here? This has to be some kind of misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Sarah, I said calmly. I invited them. I thought it would be nice for all your loved ones to be here to celebrate with us. Her face went through several expressions before settling on forced confusion. Loved ones? James, I've mentioned Marcus maybe twice in passing. He's just someone I know from the neighborhood. And those children. She trailed off, probably realizing that any explanation she offered would only dig her deeper. They seem to know you pretty well, I observed. Emma was so excited to see you in your wedding dress. She called you beautiful. Before Sarah could respond, Marcus appeared beside us, holding Ethan's hand while Emma skipped alongside them. The children had been asking to see Mommy again, and Marcus had decided it was time for the formal introduction. Sarah, Marcus said with carefully controlled politeness, congratulations on your wedding. The kids wanted to come say hello. Mommy! Emma burst out again, reaching up towards Sarah. Your dress is so pretty. Are you a real princess now? Sarah looked like she might faint. She knelt down to Emma's level, her hands shaking as she smoothed the little girl's hair. Hello, sweetheart. You look very pretty, too. Why didn't you tell us you were getting married? Ethan asked with the blunt curiosity of a 3-year-old. Daddy says you're marrying Uncle James, but you're already married to Daddy. The small group of guests nearby had gone quiet, clearly straining to hear this bizarre conversation. I could see Sarah's mind racing, trying to find some explanation that wouldn't destroy everything right there in the middle of our cocktail hour. It's complicated, honey, Sarah managed. Sometimes grown-ups have special friendships that are hard to explain. But Daddy, you said Mommy was your wife, Emma said, looking up at Marcus with confusion. And now she's Uncle James's wife too. Can people have 2 husbands? Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle for the children. No, sweetheart. People can't have 2 husbands. Mommy made some choices that were difficult. By now, a small crowd had gathered around us, including both sets of parents and several wedding party members. Everyone was trying to piece together what they were witnessing. Sarah's sister Jennifer pushed through the group, her face already showing the dawning realization of what was happening. Sarah, Jennifer said slowly, who are these people? And why is that little girl calling you Mommy? Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked around at all the confused, expectant faces and seemed to realize that there was no lie clever enough to explain this situation away. That's when Marcus stepped forward and took control of the conversation. I think there's been some confusion, he said in a voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. My name is Marcus Peterson. Sarah and I have been together for 4 years. We got married 8 months ago, and these are our children, Emma and Ethan. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's mother gasped audibly. My father's face went red with anger. Jennifer's mouth fell open in shock. That's impossible, my mother said weakly. Sarah and James have been engaged for 8 months. They've been planning this wedding for... Ma'am, Marcus said respectfully, I have the marriage certificate at home. Sarah Martinez Peterson has been my wife since October 15th of last year. These children have been calling her Mommy since they were old enough to talk. Sarah finally found her voice. This is all a misunderstanding, she said frantically, looking around at the shocked faces. Marcus, you know our relationship isn't... We never said we were exclusive. And James, you know I care about you, but... But what, Sarah? I asked calmly. But you've been living 2 separate lives for 3 years. But you've been lying to me every single day about where you go and who you're with. But you let me plan a wedding and invite 120 people to celebrate a marriage you never intended to honor. The crowd around us was growing larger as more guests realized something dramatic was happening. I could see people pulling out their phones, probably recording what was quickly becoming the wedding disaster of the century. Mommy, why is everyone upset? Emma asked, tugging on Sarah's dress. Did we do something wrong? That question broke something in Sarah. She knelt down and gathered both children into her arms, tears streaming down her face. No, babies, you didn't do anything wrong. Mommy did something wrong. Mommy made some very bad choices. Are you going to come home with us tonight? Ethan asked innocently. Daddy made your favorite dinner for when you got back from work. Sarah's sobs got louder, and I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and genuine sadness watching her world collapse. This was what I'd wanted, for her to face the full consequences of her deception, but seeing her hold those confused children made me remember that there were innocent victims in this situation too. David, my best man, appeared at my elbow. Dude, he whispered, what do you want to do here? Should we clear the room, cancel dinner? This is getting pretty intense. I looked around at the crowd of shocked wedding guests, at Marcus standing protectively near his children, at Sarah crying in her wedding dress, and I realized we'd reached the point of no return. "No," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We're not canceling anything. Sarah wanted a wedding, and she's going to get one. We're all going to go into that dining room. We're going to sit down for dinner, and we're going to have a real conversation about what marriage means and what promises are worth." I turned to the crowd of guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know this is confusing and uncomfortable, but I'm asking you to stay. There's more to this story, and I think everyone deserves to hear the truth before they decide how to feel about what they've witnessed." Then I looked directly at Sarah, who was still kneeling on the floor holding Marcus's children. "Sarah, you've spent 3 years lying to me about who you are and what you want. Tonight, for the first time since I've known you, you're going to tell the truth. And you're going to tell it in front of everyone who came here to celebrate what they thought was our love story." "But the children," Marcus said quietly. "This isn't their fault. They shouldn't have to see their mother go through this." "You're right," I agreed. "Jennifer, would you mind taking Emma and Ethan to the kids' room we set up? There are games and snacks, and they can watch movies while the adults have dinner." As Sarah's sister led the confused children away, I offered Sarah my arm. "Shall we go into dinner, Mrs. Coleman? I believe our guests are waiting." The dining room at the Fairmont Olympic had been transformed into what should have been a fairy tale setting. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables draped in ivory linens, each centerpiece a cascade of white roses and baby's breath. The head table sat on a slightly raised platform, decorated with additional flowers and lit by small spotlights that would ensure everyone could see the bride and groom throughout dinner. It was perfect for what I had planned. As our 120 guests filed into the dining room, the energy was completely different from what anyone had expected. Instead of joy and celebration, there was an undercurrent of shock, curiosity, and uncomfortable anticipation. People were whispering to each other, trying to piece together what they'd witnessed during cocktails. I'd asked Marcus to sit at the head table as planned, in the seat directly to Sarah's left. Sarah had tried to object, but I'd reminded her quietly that she'd lost the right to make requests when she'd chosen to build her life on lies. As we took our seats, I could feel every eye in the room on us. Sarah sat rigidly beside me, her face pale but composed. She'd managed to stop crying and had somehow found the strength to put on what remained of her public facade. Marcus sat down beside her with the dignity of a man who'd decided to see this through to the end. Across from us, my best man David and Sarah's maid of honor Jennifer completed the head table, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. I stood up and tapped my champagne glass with a fork. The room fell completely silent. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I know the past hour has been unexpected, but I believe in honesty, especially on what's supposed to be the most important day of your life. So before we eat, I want to share the real story of how Sarah and I got here." Sarah grabbed my wrist under the table. "James, please don't do this," she whispered urgently. "Think about what this will do to your reputation, your family. Think about what people will say." "I am thinking about it," I said quietly, then addressed the room again. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that the woman I was about to marry had been living a double life, not just having an affair, living a complete second existence with another family. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people pulled out their phones again. Sarah works part-time as a nurse, maybe 12 hours a week. The rest of the time, when she told me she was working late shifts at the hospital, she was actually living in a house 2 streets away from our apartment with her husband Marcus and their 3-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan. I gestured toward Marcus, who nodded grimly at the crowd. "Marcus, would you like to tell everyone how long you and Sarah have been together?" Marcus stood up slowly. He looked uncomfortable but determined. "Sarah and I have been in a relationship for 4 years, he said, his voice steady. "We got married 8 months ago in my brother's backyard. We have twin children together who call her Mommy. Until 3 days ago, I had no idea James existed." The room erupted in shocked conversations. I heard Sarah's mother crying somewhere behind us. My father was staring at Sarah with an expression of pure disgust. "The remarkable thing," I continued, "is how well Sarah managed to keep these 2 lives separate. She had different schedules, different phone numbers, different personalities for each family. With me, she was the dedicated career woman who was too tired for much affection. With Marcus, she was the playful young mother who organized family activities and game nights." Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can't listen to this," she said, her voice breaking. "James, you're humiliating me in front of everyone I care about. If you want to end our marriage, fine, but don't destroy me in the process." "Destroy you?" I asked, genuinely incredulous. "Sarah, you destroyed yourself. You destroyed Marcus. You destroyed those children's sense of security. You destroyed every relationship in this room by forcing all of us to be part of your lie." "But I love you," she said desperately, tears streaming down her face again. "I love both of you. I never meant for it to go this far. I was going to figure it out. I was going to make a choice." "When?" Marcus asked, standing up beside her. "When were you going to make a choice, Sarah? After you married both of us? After Emma and Ethan were old enough to realize their mother was never around? After James and I figured it out on our own?" The raw pain in his voice was heartbreaking. I could see tears in his eyes as he continued. "Do you know what Emma asked me last week? She asked me why Mommy didn't love us enough to stay home. She's 3 years old, and she already thinks it's her fault that you disappear." Sarah sank back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she sobbed. I couldn't choose. I couldn't give up either life." "So you chose to take both," I said. "You chose to steal 3 years of my life and 4 years of Marcus's life and 3 years of those children's lives because you were too selfish to make a difficult decision." My mother stood up from her table. "Sarah," she said, her voice shaking with emotion, "I welcomed you into our family. I spent months helping you plan this wedding. I gave you my grandmother's pearls to wear today because I thought you were going to be my daughter-in-law. How could you do this to us? How could you do this to my son?" Sarah looked up at her with a face full of anguish. "Mrs. Coleman, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt James. I care about him so much, and I care about you and your family." "Care about us?" my father interjected, his voice like thunder. "You made fools of us all. You let us pay for this wedding, this reception. You let us invite our friends and family to celebrate a marriage that was a complete sham from the beginning." Jennifer, Sarah's maid of honor and sister, finally found her voice. "Sarah, Mom and Dad are here. They drove 6 hours to see you get married. They've been bragging to their friends for months about their daughter's beautiful wedding. How am I supposed to explain this to them?" "And what about the clinic?" asked one of Sarah's co-workers from her table near the back. "You told us James knew about your family situation and was okay with it. You said you were all working it out together." I turned to look at her. "Is that what you told people, that I knew about Marcus and the kids?" Sarah nodded miserably. "I had to tell them something. They knew I had children. They'd seen pictures on my desk. I said that you were okay with taking things slow because of my complicated situation." "Unbelievable," Marcus said, shaking his head. "So everyone in your work life thinks James is some kind of saint who's patiently waiting for you to sort out your previous relationship, and everyone in James's life thinks I'm just some random friend of yours." "I was going to tell you both," Sarah said desperately. "After the wedding, I was going to sit down with both of you and explain everything. I thought maybe we could work something out. Maybe we could—" "What?" I asked. "Maybe we could what, Sarah? Maybe Marcus and I would be okay sharing you. Maybe we'd be thrilled to discover we'd both been living lies." The room was completely silent now, except for Sarah's crying. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, transfixed by the drama unfolding at the head table. I looked out at our guests, friends and family members who'd traveled from across the country to celebrate what they thought was a love story. Some looked angry, some looked sad, some just looked shocked, but they all deserved to know how this story ended. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I asked you all to stay for dinner because I wanted you to understand something important. Marriage isn't just about love. It's about trust, honesty, commitment, and respect." Sarah violated every single one of those principles, not just with me, but with Marcus and with those innocent children who call her mommy. I turned to Sarah one final time. "You wanted a wedding, Sarah. You got one. You wanted to be the center of attention, to have everyone celebrate your special day. Well, this is it. This is your wedding day, and this is how it's going to be remembered." But the night wasn't over yet. There was one more revelation coming that would leave everyone in that room completely speechless. The silence that followed my words stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Sarah sat hunched in her chair, her wedding dress now stained with tears, looking smaller and more broken than I'd ever seen her. Marcus stood beside the table with his hands clenched at his sides, clearly struggling between anger and the pain of watching the mother of his children fall apart in front of 120 strangers. Then, from somewhere in the back of the room, slow clapping began. I looked up to see David's girlfriend Emma, not to be confused with Marcus's daughter, standing at her table applauding. "Bravo," she called out. "Honestly, bravo. That took guts." A few other people joined in the applause, though most of the room remained silent and uncomfortable. I held up my hand to stop it. "This isn't a performance," I said. "This is real life, and real people got hurt. Sarah, Marcus's children, all of us, we're all going to have to live with the consequences of what happened here for a long time." That's when Marcus surprised everyone by sitting back down and reaching for the microphone I'd been using. "If I could say something," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I know this is James's wedding, and I know none of you expected to meet me tonight. But I want you all to understand something about those two little kids who are upstairs right now watching cartoons." He paused, collecting himself. "Emma and Ethan have never done anything wrong. They didn't ask to be born into this situation, and they don't deserve to be hurt because of their mother's choices. Whatever happens next, whether Sarah gets help, whether she faces legal consequences, whether she ever sees them again, those kids are going to need support." He looked directly at Sarah. "I've already filed for emergency custody, and my lawyer thinks I'll get it. But that means Emma and Ethan are going to grow up without their mother, and someday they're going to have questions about why she left them." Sarah's head snapped up. "You can't take them from me," she whispered. "Marcus, they're my babies. I love them more than my own life." "Then why weren't they enough?" he asked, and the pain in his voice made several people in the audience start crying. "If you loved them more than your own life, why did you keep disappearing? Why did you choose to maintain this fantasy instead of being their mother?" Sarah had no answer for that, because there wasn't one. She'd chosen excitement and deception over stability and love, and now she was facing the consequences. My father stood up from his table. "I think it's time for people to start leaving," he said firmly. "This family needs privacy to sort through this mess." But I held up my hand again. "Actually, Dad, there's one more thing everyone needs to know. Sarah, tell them about the storage unit." Sarah's face went white again. "James, please. Tell them about the credit cards, the forged documents, the gifts from both families that you kept like trophies." Marcus stared at her. "What storage unit?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken. "She has a storage unit across town filled with engagement rings from both of us, jewelry, love letters, wedding gifts from your families. She's been collecting evidence of her double life like souvenirs." "My grandmother's pearls," my mother whispered from her table. "The ones I gave you to wear today. They're in the storage unit," I confirmed, "along with the watch Marcus gave her for Christmas and the necklace I bought her for our anniversary." Marcus was staring at Sarah with an expression of complete disgust. "You kept our Christmas gifts in storage? Gifts from our children?" "I didn't know what else to do with them," Sarah said weakly. "I couldn't keep everything at both places without someone noticing." "So you treated our entire relationship like a part-time hobby," Marcus said. "Our children's artwork, their Father's Day gifts to you, everything they made you at daycare. It's all sitting in some storage unit because acknowledging our existence was inconvenient for your other life." That's when Jennifer, Sarah's sister, stood up and walked toward the head table. "Sarah," she said quietly, "Mom and Dad need to leave. They can't handle seeing you like this anymore. But before they go, they want to know, is any of it real? Do you actually love James? Do you love Marcus? Or have you just been playing games with everyone's lives?" Sarah looked up at her sister with red-rimmed eyes. "I do love them. I love them both. That's why I couldn't choose." "That's not love," Jennifer said firmly. "Love is about putting someone else's needs before your own. Love is about honesty and sacrifice and commitment. What you did was selfish and cruel and destructive." She turned to address the room. "I want everyone here to know that Sarah's family had no idea about any of this. We're just as shocked and horrified as you are, and we're going to make sure she gets the help she clearly needs." As people began to stand up and gather their belongings, I found myself looking around the beautiful dining room that was supposed to host our wedding reception. The untouched dinner plates, the wilted flowers, the champagne bottles that would never be opened in celebration. "James," Sarah said quietly, reaching for my hand, "I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I need you to know that what I felt for you was real. The way you made me laugh, the way you held me when I was sad, the plans we made for our future, none of that was pretend." I looked down at her, this woman I'd thought I'd spend my life with, and felt something like pity. "Sarah, the problem isn't that your feelings weren't real. The problem is that your actions made your feelings meaningless. You can't love someone and lie to them every day. You can't build a future with someone while you're secretly building a different future with someone else." I stood up and addressed the room one final time. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I know this wasn't the celebration any of us expected, but I'm grateful you stayed to witness the truth." Sarah and I won't be taking a honeymoon, obviously, but I hope you'll all stay in touch as I figure out what comes next. As people began filing out, many stopped to hug me or shake my hand. Several slipped me their business cards with offers of help. Lawyers, therapists, friends who wanted to make sure I had support through what was coming. Marcus lingered after most of the crowd had left. "What you did tonight took courage," he said. "I'm not sure I would have been able to go through with it. I did it for those kids as much as for us," I told him. "They deserve to know the truth about their mother, even if it hurts." "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we pick up the pieces," I said. "You focus on Emma and Ethan, I focus on rebuilding my life, and Sarah faces the consequences of her choices." 6 months later, I'm writing this story from my new apartment across town. Marcus got full custody of the twins, as expected. Sarah ended up pleading guilty to credit card fraud and identity theft. Apparently her financial deceptions went even deeper than we'd realized. She served 4 months in county jail and is now in court-mandated therapy. I haven't spoken to her since that night, but I heard through Jennifer that Sarah asks about me and Marcus constantly. She seems to finally understand what she lost, but understanding and accepting are two different things. Marcus and I have become unlikely friends. We get coffee sometimes and talk about how we're both doing, how the kids are adjusting, how strange it is to build a friendship with someone you initially met as a fellow victim of betrayal. Emma and Ethan are doing better than anyone expected. Children are resilient, and with Marcus providing stability and honesty about their situation in age-appropriate ways, they're learning to trust again. They still ask about mommy sometimes, but less frequently than they used to. As for me, I'm taking things one day at a time. I started therapy immediately after the wedding disaster, and I'm learning to trust my instincts again, to recognize red flags I missed before, to believe that not everyone is hiding a secret life. People ask me if I regret exposing Sarah so publicly, if I wish I'd handled it differently. The answer is no. She made her choices in front of an audience of everyone who loved us, and she deserved to face the consequences in front of that same audience. More importantly, that night taught everyone in the room, including me, something valuable about the difference between love and deception, between commitment and convenience, between the person someone pretends to be and who they actually are. Sarah wanted a wedding she'd never forget. She got one. We all did. And sometimes when I'm having a particularly good day, I remember that little Emma's voice calling out, "Mommy," across that silent ballroom was the moment the truth finally broke free. Even at 3 years old, she knew her mother when she saw her. She just didn't understand why her mother looked so scared to see her. The truth has a way of finding the light, no matter how carefully we try to bury it. And sometimes, painful as it is, the truth is the greatest gift we can give each other. Even at a wedding that was never meant to be,